Welcome, everyone, and very happy to have you joining today. My name is Robert Slaughter, and I'm the president of Competently, and we are the most complete organizational assessment and talent intelligence platform on the marketplace. Real quickly before I introduce our special guest today, but what that means is that we are actually looking at the organization and the whole person. We look at IQ, EQ, and AQ and look how they interact with each other to give a better picture, a more dependable picture, more reliable picture of your talent assets inside of your organization. And not only how you can support them with development pathways, but reallocate talent inside the organization to meet the needs of, the constant change that all businesses are going through right now. And we are very fortunate to have a special guest with us today, Malvika Jethmalani, and she is the co-founder of the Atvis Group. And they are a strategic human capital advisory firm. And I love their main premise of their organization. They say to win in the marketplace, businesses must first win the workplace. And I couldn't agree more. Constantly we're looking at, is it a technology issue? Is it a process issue? But everything starts with the people inside of your organization. Technology is going to come and go. Processes are going to be rewritten constantly. But how you manage your people, your talent, if you will, how do you develop them, covet them, the right ones? And once again, they're the ones that are going to lead the charge. So Malvika has written a fantastic blog post that's up on our website, competently.ai. It's also on our LinkedIn page. It's 5 steps towards building an AI-friendly culture. And I really do recommend anyone that is, pondering listen, we all know AI is going to impact our companies, absolutely. But how do we actually apply that and execute that? And how are people going to manage that and the change that it's going to bring in their day-to-day work environments? And, AI deployment is not a flipping a switch. It's not a set it and forget it, in my opinion. It is something that has completely flipped hierarchical structures, and it's changed everything that we're going to be doing in work. It is often ushered into organizations from a bottom-up approach, meaning we have essentially given carte blanche the ability for people to bring AI tools into organizations because we're asking them to be more productive, and what's lacking, in my opinion, and I don't know if Malvika will agree with me, we'll find out here in a minute, but often what's lacking is an organizational strategy that is going to not only help deploy AI across the organization, but then manage it effectively and, all the processes, all of the processes around software that we have inside of organizations were never developed in light of AI. They're all going to have to be rewritten, all of them. So I know that's not. I don't want to be too doom and gloom, but I think that we've got a very large mountain to climb, and you really do need to listen to people that understand what's happening and actually have some well thought out ideas on how do we make this all work. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Malvika, and if you'd like, just we can get into what are the 5 steps, if you will, and you can go as deep as you want into them. But if you want to just start off, kind of give us an overview of what does an AI friendly culture look like to you in your organization.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate you setting some context here. So I'll tell you a little bit about kind of how I think about all of this and how my career has informed my perspective. So I've been a 3-time CHRO. I've spent most of my career in human resources, but I didn't start out in HR. I was an accounting major. And so early in my career, I did accounting and finance work. I really enjoyed it, but I didn't see myself doing that for my entire career. So I made the pivot into HR, but I describe myself as someone who's not a traditional HR leader because of that training and background. And my core skill set really is I help organizations draw insights out of data and analytics to inform people decisions. And I've never been of the school of thought that HR and the people stuff is the fluffy stuff, and we can't measure it. And so I've always been a data nerd. I've always been a tech nerd. Most of my career has been spent in tech and tech-enabled organizations. So this is a topic that I'm incredibly passionate about, and I'm glad we're spending time today on this. It's something I've been thinking about quite a bit, but especially over the last year as I've started to launch and scale Atvis Group. I talk to so many founders and CEOs and even some board members who talk about AI as the end all be all and as the thing that's going to help them solve all of their business problems without taking into consideration the behaviors, the mindsets, the rituals, and the ways of working that they need to change in their organizations. And I think many of them want to sort of slap the AI sticker on things and call it a day because they're suffering from shiny object syndrome, and or they're seeing their competitors do it. They're reading all about AI. And I think lifting and shifting the technology without focusing on the culture, without focusing on the people aspect, to me, it's like trying to build a house on a shaky foundation. It just doesn't work. And if you think about past technological advances, if you think about e-commerce, I think we are old enough here on this call to talk about the days before e-commerce. But when you think about e-commerce, when you think about when banks shifted to online banking, the digitization of the workplace, when we moved to the cloud, we didn't just send a memo, right? We didn't just bring a new technology in and say, okay, now we're done. We're a digital workplace now, or we do online banking now, or we're an e-commerce company. We really invested not only in reskilling and upskilling of our workforces, but we invested in helping our leaders understand what are the new behaviors that we expect from them. How do we expect them to lead given these changes? And I think as we think about AI, we need to now think about how do we equip our people and our leaders with the tools and the training that they need to succeed in this new world.
Yeah.
So
That is an excellent point. And if you could, why do you think it's different with AI than it has been with other technologies that have, come before it? Why do you feel, and you may, why do we feel that it is just, there's, like you said, a memo that's going to go out. We are now an AI organization, and that's about as much as coming from C-suites. Can you elaborate just a little bit on that?
I think there's a few things at play here. First of all, AI is coming on the heels of AI has been part of the technological advances in the business world for a while, right? But now AI is becoming more mainstream, if you will. Individuals have access to a lot of AI computing power now, but it's coming on the heels of a lot of seismic shifts, not only in the world, but in the workplace. It's coming on the heels of a global pandemic that flipped the paradigm of work on its head. It's coming on the heels of tumultuous, volatile economy, the interest rate environment that we've all seen, the inflationary environment, geopolitical tension, all of these things, anxiety in the workplace stemming from elections and other things. All of these things have pushed leaders and CEOs to rethink how they lead in this really uncertain world. And now on top of that, you have AI, which is adding to, in some cases, worker stress and anxiety. And it's partly because the first reaction from many leaders and many CEOs and boards is, how quickly can we replace our people? Yeah. And how quickly can this technology come in and help me affect the bottom line? So that's one part of it. The other part of it is it's coming on the heels of an employer-employee relationship that is operating in a trust deficit at the moment, I feel. Mm-hmm. If you look at the kind of top-down draconian return to office mandates, or the tracking of office badge swipes, or the tracking of keyboard activity or mouse activity. All of these things signal to the employees, we do not trust you, right?
Yeah.
And as we know, trust is a two-way street. And so employees are also responding with things like quiet quitting and lazy girl jobs is a trend that exploded on TikTok last year. With all of these changes in behaviors, and the data supports it, right? If you look at, I think I have a data point here in the blog post where we say that only a third of workers say that they trust the management in their company. So if you don't feel trusted, obviously you're less likely to give that trust back. And so I think those are a couple of the things that are different about AI, but also it is possibly, other than the internet, possibly one of the biggest, most revolutionary technological advances that we've seen as a species, right? Probably since the Industrial Revolution and then the internet. And if you think about electricity, for example, when electricity came out, people were excited about like having street lighting. They didn't think about all of the ways in which electricity can be used. And now here we are sitting in 2024 with the knowledge of the millions of ways in which we can use it. And I think that's kind of how I think about AI as well. It's so nebulous to a lot of people, and the potential is so limitless that it can be scary.
Yeah. Yeah. So would it be fair to say that you feel that AI adoption inside of organization is not a technical issue, but it is a people and a cultural issue primarily?
Absolutely. And not only the adoption, but the ROI and the results. It's a direct result of how supported the people feel, and how whether the culture and the environment is enabling people to drive those business outcomes.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, what other, you have five, I think five foundational steps. What else is, in your opinion, paramount when organizations are either starting this journey, or let's say they're mid-journey right now and things are not going the way they feel they should be going? I think I just read, there are many stories on this, but now it looks like, the over promise and under deliver of AI is hitting financial sheets where the ROI simply is not what we all expected, or especially those in finance and in the C-suite. So what, out of your five steps, what would you like to focus on right now that can help these organizations, like I said, that are maybe now just really plunging in the pool, or let's say they've had that first hiccup?
Yes, so we discussed the first one briefly. It's trust. I think trust is the foundation of everything. As Patrick Lencioni, the author of The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, says, the lack of trust is the most severe dysfunction that a team can be faced with. So if you don't have trust, I would encourage leaders to really take a hard look at their culture and think about ways in which they can cultivate trust, and think about their actions and their behaviors and whether they are conveying to their people that they trust them. Once you have that foundation of trust, I then urge the leaders that I talk to and work with to think about whether they are creating and crafting a culture of experimentation. If you want to innovate, you have to experiment. And when you experiment, you don't always succeed.
Hmm.
And so leaders should be asking themselves, are they creating an environment where experimentation is encouraged, and failing is not just acceptable, but encouraged also? And you don't have to go out and experiment in a big way. You can create safe spaces for people to experiment. In my past experience, I've done hackathons, which have been incredibly successful. I've even done hackathons within HR teams on, how can we best use AI to make our work better within HR and support the employee experience process. You can roll out pilots. And so it doesn't have to be an all or nothing approach. It can be contained in a very safe way, and you can create a safe space for your people to experiment. And when people experiment and things don't go to plan, that also creates resilience and it creates organizational wisdom, because now we know we did something, it didn't work, and now we can have a postmortem and we can have learnings that we can apply in the future. The next step that I think is super important is creating a culture of psychological safety. And when I talk about psychological safety, unfortunately, even sitting here today in 2024, many leaders react with, oh, that's a buzzword, psychological safety. I don't want to hear any more about psychological safety, right? But it's been shown now over and over that, in fact, McKinsey has shown through their research that psychological safety is directly tied to team and business outcomes. And so we have data now to prove that. And if you think about psychological safety in action, one of the organizations that comes to my mind is Toyota. We all know the and-on cord that they have in the manufacturing plants, right? So anyone can pull the cord and stop the production line if they sense or observe an issue. Now, in order to do that, for any employee at any level to be able to stop production at any point because they think that there's a quality issue, that takes a lot of psychological safety. That takes an environment where you have empowered your people to, at any point, put a stop to the process because they think there's an issue. And in this case, of course, the production slows down temporarily, but in the long run, you are preventing financial loss, reputational damage, and in this case, also loss of potentially human life, because safety is important in the vehicle that you're driving and that your family is driving in. And so I think that is really the power of psychological safety, is you create an environment of excellence and you create an environment where anyone, regardless of their position in the org chart, is empowered to share their perspective, to ask the tough questions, and to challenge the status quo. And that's really how we all get better.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I really appreciate your use of vocabulary and how you just described psychological safety. And what I mean by that specifically is we both chuckled as you brought that up. It's been very, let's say, non-quantifiable in the past, what you were just discussing. And my experience with CEOs and CFOs is that's just something they wouldn't understand. But you intentionally reference McKinsey and tying that to a business outcome, a quantifiable business outcome. And that's the change that I think that I'm seeing, and I think it's exciting in human resources, is learning the language of the C-suite and how important that is, and how you did that. Once again, and maybe not the same report, but McKinsey being so far out in front of all this, they were just referencing the fact that, organizations that can assess and reallocate talent are 2x more profitable than other organizations. And why do I bring that up? And I'm going to connect this here in a second. This may be unpopular for you to hear from me, but and you probably know this, but CEOs and CFOs really don't care about L&D. They don't care about training. But when you convert it into their language, the means to the end, profitability, effectiveness, efficiencies, when HR can speak that language, that's the game changer. And I see it happening. And I see all of a sudden there's a strategic partnership there. So sorry to sidetrack you, but I was just really happy to hear how you took psychological safety and then quantified it in a way that the C-suite would understand exactly what you were talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more with what you said. And I think this is where my finance and accounting background is extremely helpful, because when I make a recommendation to a CEO or to a board, I always come with a data-backed recommendation, whether it's quantitative or qualitative data. And it's important to me that I speak the language of the business, because I consider myself a business leader first and an HR leader second.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. So please continue. I think we're on 3 or 4 at this point.
Yes, yes, we are on number 4. We're approaching the end. So the fourth trick or cheat code really here is to foster a culture of continuous learning. And the reason I think this is super important, and I'd be interested in your perspective given the work that you're doing at Competently and the solutions you're developing. But the reason I think this is super, super critical is the volume and pace of change only continue to accelerate. And
Yeah.
therefore, the skills that we need to do our jobs are changing very, very quickly. In fact, by 2030, the skills that are required to do our jobs will change by 65%.
Yeah.
And, when the pandemic happened, almost overnight, leaders needed to become experts on how to lead remote and distributed teams. And over the past few years, we've had to learn how to create space for people to bring their whole selves to the workplace, including their mental health issues and their political and social beliefs and everything, the full package. And now we're having to reskill and upskill and learn how to manage AI and in the workplace, and how does AI work alongside humans and augment human work, and how do we balance AI providing input into decisions and also bringing in the human creativity and human capabilities around nuanced conversations,
Yeah.
and not just making decisions based on data aggregation and an algorithmic output. And so I think to balance all of this and to still continue to create human first, people first workplaces and people first AI strategies, I think we will need to embrace continuous learning, because today it's AI, tomorrow it might be something else. But this idea that we need to continue to be curious and open-minded and open to learning new things, I think is not just a success factor for organizations. I think as individuals, we need to think about how we can future-proof our careers through
Yeah.
continuous learning. And I would love to hear kind of how you think about this. I reference here the AI-enabled personalized assessment from Competently, but
Mhm.
this is your wheelhouse. So what do you think?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and you're so spot on. I think Accenture calls it the Russian doll of change, and where they reference it is that um, through some I forget how many people were part of the study, but they claim that today the average employee can handle about half the change they could 10 years ago. And we all kind of scratch our heads, really? Because it's just being thrown at them all the time. Well, there lies the problem.
Mhm.
Change is so constant. It's accelerating. And getting back to the Russian doll of change, it's change inside of change, and it never stops. There's never breathing room for an employee, ever right now. And you're absolutely right. We started off as a hard skills assessment platform, and we took a long, hard look as I think that you couldn't read an HR article right now without reading skills based this, skills based that, upskill, reskill, and I'm not besmirching any of those articles, but hard skills are going to come and go, as you said. What is sought after today may not even be something on an organization's radar 6 months from now. So we took a hard look at ourselves, and we decided, we need to look at the employee or the organization in totality. So what are the hard skills, the soft skills, or the EQ, what we call, of course, EQ, that helps culturally and with, relationship building? Is it someone that can communicate effectively? And then finally, we also bring into what is my major focus coming from a sales background. We call it our adversity quotient. What is going to happen to these employees at the first time something goes sideways or, God forbid, south? How do they How do they handle adversity and change and constant, that constant living inside the Russian doll of change? So we bring these all together, and we look at them not in isolation. It's not simply an IQ assessment, an EQ assessment, and an AQ assessment, but then we look, how does IQ directly impact EQ? And then how does EQ directly impact AQ? And then how does it loop back? And then how do we set up employees for career longevity inside of an organization, but as you say, a continuous cycle of learning and development? Because once again, the skills are going to change, but what makes up that person is foundational, and understanding that person in order to help better put them on a learning pathway is paramount for a lot of organizations. You know, another not maybe very positive POV that I have, but I don't believe AI is going to come in and take everybody's job. I don't, at this point. But I do believe it is going to impact quite a few employees. Don't get me wrong. I do believe that we will have a pretty dramatic downsizing, especially around white collar jobs in the not only in the global workforce. But with that, the silver lining is that every organization needs to start thinking to themselves, okay, so if talent is the single largest cost that I have on my books, and I am going to pair, and I'm going to be able to, let's say, subtract 20, 30, maybe even 40% of that cost, the remaining talent, the remaining employees left in my organization better be a damn all-star team. I have the ability to invest in the best people, develop them, and I'm going to covet them. I'm going to hold on to them. I'm going to nurture them. That is what I think is the silver lining with talent. There's never been a better time to be good at what you do right now.
That's so well said. I couldn't agree more. You talked about soft skills, and I think that one of the characteristics of the age of AI is it's actually becoming easier to acquire the hard skills, the technical skills.
Absolutely.
I'm not a
Absolutely.
graphic
They're
designer.
commoditized. They're a commodity.
They're
Absolutely.
commoditized. And, I'm not a graphic designer, but as I've been scaling my business, I have graphic design needs from time to time. And I thought to myself, instead of hiring someone and, vetting and going through the whole process, why don't I just see if I can kind of do some basic graphic design myself? And now with all of these AI tools, even Canva has, an AI component, you can become a pretty good graphic designer. I'm not an expert, obviously, but it's easier to acquire these types of skills. And I think in the age of AI, the soft skills will become the power skills.
Mm-hmm.
The human to human interaction, how to communicate, how to show empathy, how to provide feedback in a candid yet respectful manner, how to influence people without authority. I think all of these skills are going to be in demand. And by the way, we're seeing that ask from employees. So I just read a stat recently that said 74% of Gen Z and millennial employees are willing to leave their current organization if they don't see the career development and career mobility opportunities that they're looking for. And so continuous learning and continuous development is going to be not just necessary to gain and maintain a competitive advantage, but it's going to be necessary to retain your people, as you said.
Yeah.
You're going to want to retain them because you're going to have a smaller, leaner staff. And then you talked about change, right? And the fact that there's this constant wave of change coming at us. And that's really point number 5. In the blog post, we talk about how 82% of HR leaders say that their leaders in their organization are not equipped to lead change effectively. And it shouldn't surprise any of us, right? In this kind of wave of constant change, there are very few organizations that I know of that have taken the time to invest in teaching their leaders how to effectively lead change, especially in a world where there's so much change fatigue coming at employees from all angles. And I think
Mhm.
so much of this is explaining to people the why, helping them understand the bigger picture. So in this case, when you're deploying an AI initiative, helping people understand, how does it tie into the bigger picture? What role do you play? The work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, how does that work contribute to the organization's mission? And how is that work critical for this AI initiative to be successful? And then, kind of putting on our marketing hats. Marketing people say they have the rule of 7. They say you have to send the same message to the consumer 7 times, possibly in 7 different ways, before they can make the purchasing decision on the product. And so I think we all have to put on that marketing hat. And when we think about change management and when we think about communicating to our employees, we need to think, how can we reach employees and give them that same message over and over until it really sticks and until they understand it? And how can we reach them in different ways? Town hall meetings, Slack channels, team meetings, focus groups, one-on-ones. And I think people are craving that change. Part of the reason, coming back to point number 1, why trust is very low, is often people feel that these changes are being done to them,
Yeah.
not with them. And
Yeah.
so as employers, as leaders, if we want effective change management, if we want people to buy in, we have to involve them in co-creating the policies and the processes that they are going to be consumers of. So just like product people gather VOC, or voice of the customer, when they're developing products or putting together their product roadmap, we need to get better at gathering VOE, or voice of the employee, when we're designing work and workplaces
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
policies that will affect them.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were saying that, it's there's no wonder. I think that it's almost now 7 out of 10 change management projects fail inside of organizations, and we wonder why. And it's EQ. EQ is the driver. All change. I mean, all management is change management, and it all, to me, stems from the EQ skills and competencies that will allow these things to be successful. But in my opinion, we've never been able to truly quantify these skills, these EQ skills, and then be able to, because you can identify these things, but then you've got to help. How do we how do we develop them for these
Mhm.
employees? And so that's getting back to competently, we're able to objectively quantify EQ, and then able to, okay, so now we've assessed the person and the individual. Now, how do we develop them? How do we even EQ? How do we develop EQ? And that's something that I think has been missing in most organizations, is that, like you said, they can talk about these things, they can qualify them, but quantifying them is much differently. And then, God forbid, how do we nurture and develop them to ensure that they are bringing the best out of themselves, that in turn is going to bring the best out of their people and the projects they're working on.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And like we said earlier, right, slapping the AI sticker on things is not enough. You really need
Oh,
to
yeah.
think about this from a people and culture perspective. And we're at a time now where there's no better time. There's no better time than to take a hard look at your people, their skills, the skill gaps that you have, at your culture, and really ask yourself, are we creating the right environment to drive the ROI from all of these AI initiatives? And if not, then I would rather these leaders stop, take a breath, instead of throwing more money at the technology, assess the people and culture side of things before you move forward.
Fantastic. Malvika, where can someone learn more about your organization and how to get in touch with you if it's something that they need assistance with?
We are at atvisgroup.com. That's ATVIS group.com. And then follow me on LinkedIn and send me a message directly if you'd like to chat about anything and all things people.
Fantastic. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being a part of this. I've learned quite a bit, and it's really refreshing. I really admire your point of view, especially coming from a human resources and really, you know, driving this inside of organizations. I think that's fantastic. And so, once again, thank you, and best of luck, and hopefully, we'll talk very, very soon.
I hope so too. This was fun.
All
Thanks,
right.
Rob.
Thanks for joining, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Is that enough, Mark? I'm sure it was.